You know that gut-dropping ice in your veins feeling you get when you realize something has gone horribly, irrevocably wrong? That's exactly what hit me, Rachel, at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. It wasn't just a regular Tuesday, though. It was a slow, soul-crushing Tuesday where the silence in the office was thick enough to chew on, and my biggest excitement for the day was trying to find out if the vending machine was ever going to stock those cheesy baked chips again. I was just gliding past my boss's office, the notoriously closed-door sanctuary of Mr. Harrison, or H as we affectionately, or maybe fearfully, called him, on my way to the sad excuse for a break-room coffee machine. I was maybe 2 steps from the door, mentally debating the merits of adding a second unearned sugar packet to my watery brew, when I heard it. My pace slowed. Not intentionally, but it was like an invisible tripwire had snapped around my ankles. The sound was faint at first, just a muffled murmur, which was normal. Which was always on calls. But then the murmur stopped, and I heard a burst of sound that cut through the silence like a jagged piece of glass. A laugh. A distinct, booming, slightly maniacal laugh that belonged only to H when he thought he was being terribly clever. And then the words. They were spoken a little louder, a little faster, and the name that bounced off the glass partition and hit me squarely in the chest was mine. And then Rachel walks in. Rachel. That was it. Name. Just my plain, unadventurous name, followed by another muffled voice. It sounded like Sarah from accounting, who always wore those aggressively cheerful floral prints, and then another wave of suppressed giggles. It was like they were sharing a joke, a fantastic, delicious piece of gossip, and the punchline was me. The office has an unwritten rule. If the door is closed, you don't stop, you don't pause, you keep moving like a low-flying ghost. But the sound of my own name, combined with that particular brand of high-volume office mirth, short-circuited my adherence to all corporate decorum. I stopped dead. I pressed my ear, as subtly as a 6-foot giraffe in a brightly lit hallway can manage, against the cool, slick wood of the door. The air shifted, and the tone inside dropped dramatically, becoming more hushed and conspiratorial. I could still hear them, though. It was clear H was running the show. His voice low and firm. We need to be absolutely sure she doesn't suspect a thing. I want it to be a total surprise. Total surprise. The words echoed in my head, and a cold sweat broke out across my forehead. A surprise. In the corporate world, a surprise usually comes in 3 flavors. 1, a surprise audit. 2, a surprise demotion. Or 3, a surprise firing. Given the laugh that preceded it, I was going to guess it wasn't option 1. My mind immediately went into overdrive, cataloging all my recent failures, all my tiny secret sins. Did he find out about the time I accidentally sent that ridiculously embarrassing meme to the all-staff email instead of my best friend Liam? No, that was months ago. Did my report on the Q3 projections have a typo in the main heading? It did, but it was a small one. Was it the 2-hour lunch break I took last week when I said I had a dentist appointment but actually went to the zoo because I needed to see something less miserable than my spreadsheets? Then the second voice, definitely Sarah, chipped in, sounding a little too earnest for my liking. And the note. Do you think the note is a little too? H cut her off sharply. No, Sarah. The note is the best part. Drives the point home. It adds the layer of theatrical drama this whole thing needs. Remember, it needs to look completely accidental, like a slip-up, but it's really the final flourish. The final flourish. Note. The theatrical drama. This wasn't a standard firing. This sounded calculated, almost theatrical. Sounded like a setup. My blood ran hot and cold simultaneously. Was this some bizarre, drawn-out prank that would end with me doing something mortifying in front of the whole department? Or worse, was it a gentle, office-appropriate way to ease me out, maybe with a small box of my belongings and a forced, uncomfortable cake that no one wanted to eat? I imagined myself being let out by security, waving weakly to the team, a single pathetic balloon floating away above my head. Had to move. I couldn't just stand there with my ear plastered to the door like a corporate spy in a bad 80s movie. I quickly straightened my clothes, tried to adjust the look of sheer panic on my face, and started walking again, trying to look casual, as if I hadn't just accidentally stumbled upon my own professional demise. I walked straight into the break room, poured myself a cup of the lukewarm sludge they called coffee, and stared blankly at the microwave clock. My hands were shaking. I needed a plan. I needed to know what surprise awaited me because right now, surprise felt like a synonym for catastrophe. Please drop a comment right now and tell me where you are watching this video from and what time it is. I went back to my desk, my heart thumping against my ribs like a trapped bird. Every single one of my coworkers suddenly looked suspicious. When Liam, my work bestie and cubicle mate, looked up and gave me a casual wave, I immediately suspected he was in on it. His smile seemed too wide, his eyes too bright. Was he secretly relishing the dramatic exit I was about to make? Was he already mentally trying to figure out how to take over my biggest account? The paranoia was setting in, thick and fast. I sat down, but I couldn't focus. All I could hear was H's booming laughter, Sarah's too eager voice, and the chilling phrase, "Total surprise." Whatever it was, I wasn't going to let them have the satisfaction of catching me off guard. I was going to get to the bottom of this surprise before it got to the bottom of me. This was now a mission of stealth and self-preservation. So, to understand the magnitude of this total surprise panic attack I was having, you need to know a little bit about the setting and, more importantly, the players involved. I've been at Stellar Innovations for 2 years now. It's a mid-sized digital marketing firm. It's the kind of place that pretends to be a laid-back startup, but secretly measures how many minutes you spend away from your keyboard. The building itself is one of those modern monstrosities. All glass, exposed ductwork, and confusing floor plans. My desk, which I had just rushed back to, is in the bullpen area, where we all sit close enough to hear each other chew, but far enough away that we have to yell to share a good piece of office gossip. My boss, Mr. Harrison, or H, is a character study in passive-aggressive leadership. He's this big guy, mid-50s, with a booming voice and a laugh that could shatter glass, as I had recently experienced. He's the type of boss who says, "I love a good work-life balance," while sending emails at 11 p.m. on a Sunday. He genuinely thinks he's the world's greatest mentor, constantly dropping these cryptic motivational quotes that never make any sense. Like last week he told me, "Rachel, remember, a smooth sea never made a skilled sailor, but a skilled sailor never let the tide track sand all over the deck." I'm still trying to figure out if that was a compliment or a hint that I needed to clean up my workspace. But here's the thing about H. He loves drama. He lives for the reveal, the big moment, the shocked faces. If he's planning a surprise, it won't be subtle. It will be a production, possibly involving a spotlight and a bad jazz soundtrack. Then there's the rest of the team. We're not just colleagues. We're a weird, dysfunctional, close-knit family, which only increases the anxiety about being the butt of a big joke or the subject of a secret conversation. First, there's Liam, my cubicle mate, my work husband, the only person who truly understands my crippling dependency on instant noodles. He's been here a year longer than I have, and he's my anchor. He's chill, perpetually sarcastic, and always wearing a hoodie, even in July. If something big were happening, he'd usually be the first to crack a joke or give me the secret head tilt that says, "Run, Rachel, run." But today he was weirdly subdued. When I sat down, heart still hammering, he just glanced over, gave a small, almost nervous smile, and immediately went back to typing. That was clue number one that something was deeply wrong. Liam is never subdued. His default state is mildly theatrical panic. Then there's Sarah from accounting, the one whose voice I recognized through the door. Sarah is the office's human calendar. She remembers everyone's birthday, work anniversary, and preferred type of snack. She is meticulous, organized, and absolutely cannot keep a secret. If H needed someone to organize the logistics of a total surprise, Sarah would be his go-to. She'd have a 12-page project plan with color-coded deadlines. The fact that she was involved meant this was serious, organized, and had a high chance of accidentally spilling out in a giant, emotional mess. She's the one who would get a paper cut and then immediately confess the whole plot to save my feelings. But she hadn't come out of H's office yet. The combination of H's love for drama, Sarah's inability to keep a secret, and Liam's suspiciously calm demeanor was a toxic stew of paranoia for me. My mind kept looping back to H's words. It needs to look completely accidental, like a slip-up, but it's really the final flourish. Final flourish. It sounded terrifyingly definitive. Was this a new client account? No, those were never surprises. They were usually heralded by 3 months of exhausting meetings and a mountain of PowerPoint slides. Was it a promotion? They don't typically discuss promotions in hushed, giggling tones, followed by conversations about a note and theatrical drama. No, this was personal. This was about Rachel. I tried to act normal. I opened my laptop, pulled up a spreadsheet, and typed the word revenue about 7 times before realizing I hadn't actually clicked into a cell. I needed a distraction, but every glance I took around the office confirmed my fears. A few people were clustered by the water cooler, talking in low voices, and when I looked over, they immediately went silent. I saw Sarah finally emerge from H's office, clutching a brightly colored folder. She immediately spotted me, gave a massive, unnatural smile that didn't reach her eyes, and power-walked straight to the printer, her back rigid. The speed and intensity of her movements were all the confirmation I needed. Operation Rachel's imminent doom was well underway. I leaned over to Liam, trying to sound casual, like I was asking about the weather and not my future employment status. "Hey Liam, everything okay? You look concentrated." He didn't even turn his head. He just gave a small shrug. "Yeah, fine. Just grinding through this quarterly report. It's a real beast." He paused, then added in a voice that was just a bit too loud. "Did you see that new email from marketing? About the office-wide cleanup. We really need to tidy up our desks, Rach. Tidy up our desks." The phrase hung in the air, suddenly loaded with menace. Was that a cryptic warning? Was he telling me to get my affairs in order? To clear out my personal photos before they boxed up my desk? A few photos of my cat, Mittens, flashed through my mind. I couldn't let them see those photos. They were going to fire me, and then look through my desk drawers and judge my poor life choices. My anxiety ratcheted up another notch, fueled by the unsettling normalcy of everyone else. I now had 2 missions: find out what the surprise was, and hide the truly embarrassing personal effects on my desk. I grabbed a file and used it to shield my face from Liam, already starting to mentally catalog which co-workers I could trust, and which ones I needed to start grilling for information. The game was officially on. The reason I immediately jumped to imminent professional disaster and not nice surprise is simple. The history of office pranks at Stellar Innovations is not just a history, it's a living, breathing, escalating nightmare. We don't just put post-it notes on monitors here. No. Our office culture is less professional collaboration and more low-stakes, high-effort psychological warfare, and I have been both the perpetrator and, more recently, the most frequent victim. This background set the stage for my immediate and intense paranoia, making H's total surprise sound less like a party and more like a poorly contained biohazard. It started subtly enough with harmless things. Someone replaced all the sugar packets with salt. Someone else hid a very realistic-sounding toy bird that chirped every hour inside the drop ceiling. Cute, right? But then, about 6 months ago, the ante was seriously upped. My colleague, David, decided to pay tribute to a ridiculously terrible horror movie we had all watched together. He managed to sneak into the office over a weekend, fill my entire cubicle with those biodegradable packing peanuts, and then buried a single ancient, crusty banana peel in the very center. It was a mess. It took me an hour to dig out my laptop, and I was finding peanuts in my backpack for a month. That set a dangerous precedent. Extreme effort for minimal gain. Then came the grand finale of our prank history, the one that scarred us all. It happened to Liam. He came in one morning and found his chair wrapped in approximately 800 feet of industrial shrink wrap, which, okay, standard prank. But the true genius, and I use that term loosely, was that H got involved. H had coordinated with the building manager, and when Liam finally unwrapped his chair, he found a note attached to it. The note wasn't a joke. It was a formal HR-looking memo stating that due to new safety regulations, everyone must now use ergonomic standing mats instead of office chairs, and his chair was being permanently relocated. Liam spent 3 agonizing, panic-fueled hours thinking he had lost his chair privileges forever, until H finally wheeled it back out, accompanied by a small, pathetic cake. The note, the drama, the sustained lie, it was textbook H. Now, recall the conversation I overheard. H mentioned a note, and theatrical drama, and wanting it to look like a slip-up but be the final flourish. That structure, the elaborate setup, the sustained tension, the formal-looking piece of communication designed to induce panic, followed by the surprise reveal, matched the Liam chair debacle perfectly. But if that was the baseline, what did my total surprise look like? My anxiety started painting scenarios in my head. They wouldn't just wrap my chair. They'd likely do something bigger, more humiliating, and potentially career-ending. What if they had replaced all my contact files with pictures of cartoon characters? What if they had hacked my computer and set up an automatic email responder that sent terrible poetry to all our clients? Or even worse, what if this surprise was a massive public practical joke designed to test my reaction to stress before delivering the real blow? Termination. This is where the paranoia truly set in. I was watching everyone like a hawk. Every whispered conversation, every quick glance, every trip to the printer felt like a covert operation. My history with these people, my friends, was now a liability. Because I knew they were capable of sustained deceit for the sake of a joke. I glanced at Liam again. He was furiously typing, avoiding eye contact. If anyone knew, it was him. Why the silence? Was he being loyal to the plan or loyal to me? I needed to test the waters. I casually stood up, stretched dramatically, and made my way to the coffee machine again. A move that gave me the perfect vantage point to sweep the room and also pass by H's closed door one more time. As I passed H's office, I didn't press my ear to the door this time. I kept walking, but I slowed my pace just enough to catch any sound. Nothing. They must have finished their meeting. But now I could try the indirect approach. I walked into the break room and found Sarah, the organizer, the one who couldn't keep a secret, filling a Tupperware container with suspiciously healthy-looking carrot sticks. This was my chance. I tried for a breezy, I'm just getting coffee demeanor. Hey Sarah, how's the quarterly reconciliation looking? Heard H was having some intense meetings this afternoon. I kept my hand on the coffee pot, feigning nonchalance. Sarah jumped, nearly dropping her container. Her face went from her usual cheerful pink to a bright, alarming shade of scarlet. She gripped the Tupperware like it was the Holy Grail. Oh, Rachel. Yeah. Meetings. Lots of stuff. She avoided my eyes completely, focusing with terrifying intensity on arranging her carrot sticks. Yeah. Anything exciting? I pressed, trying to sound genuinely curious and not like an interrogator in a thriller film. New client. Big restructuring. She stammered, her gaze darting everywhere but at me. No. Not really. Just the usual. Office things. You know. Paperwork. Administrative tasks. She emphasized, administrative tasks with the strained conviction of someone reciting a poorly memorized poem. Her face was screaming. I know a secret, and it's about you, and I'm a terrible liar. The encounter confirmed my fears. Sarah knew she was a participant, and she was terrified of giving it away. The way she had reacted, the jumpiness, the flushed face, the over-explanation of generic office tasks, was all the proof I needed that something big, bad, and Rachel-centric was unfolding. I took my coffee, which I now didn't even want, and retreated, my internal alarm bells ringing at full volume. The prank was on. And it was going to be epic. My next move had to be tactical. Covert reconnaissance. I needed hard evidence before they could spring the trap. After the disastrously confirming encounter with Sarah and her defensively clutched carrot sticks, I knew I couldn't rely on direct questioning. That path was blocked by nervous stammers and aggressive vegetable consumption. It was time for covert reconnaissance, or as I preferred to call it in my head, operation. Find my fate before it finds me. My goal was simple. get close enough to the conspirators without being noticed, and piece together the clues about the total surprise and the note. The most critical location was, naturally, H's office. It was ground zero for the plotting. Unfortunately, it was also the most visible spot in the office, surrounded by glass partitions, making any sustained surveillance impossible. I needed an excuse to be nearby, a legitimate reason to loiter. The perfect alibi presented itself in the form of the giant, perpetually broken printer, the one that always smelled faintly of burnt ozone and disappointment. It was strategically located right across the hall from H's door. I grabbed a stack of completely irrelevant old meeting notes and headed over to the printer, adopting what I hoped was an air of weary technical frustration. I jammed one sheet of paper halfway into the tray, waited for the machine to emit its characteristic, wheezing groan, and then stood back, hands on my hips, sighing loudly. This was the universal office signal for, "I am having a legitimate problem with technology. Please ignore my suspicious presence." From this vantage point, I had a clear, though indirect view of H's office and, more importantly, a line of sight to the three main co-conspirators, Liam, Sarah, and H himself. H's door was now slightly ajar. He was on a phone call, but it wasn't a business call. His tone was too relaxed, too celebratory. I pretended to be wrestling with the paper jam, my ear straining. I heard him say, "Yes, everything is secured. The drop-off is scheduled for 4 o'clock sharp. We just need to make sure she is completely preoccupied." The drop-off, 4 o'clock sharp. Completely preoccupied. A drop-off sounded less like a fun party supply and more like, say, the final sealed envelope containing my severance package, delivered by an armored car. And the 4 o'clock timing meant I only had about an hour to figure this out. I intensified my fake struggle with the printer, bending low to check the non-existent paper jam, which allowed me to angle my head closer to the door. Next, my attention shifted to Sarah. She was back at her desk, which was a good 40 feet away, but I noticed something odd. She was repeatedly checking her watch, and then glancing nervously at H's door. Every few minutes, she'd open a file on her computer, type something furiously, and then immediately minimize it when anyone walked by. She was clearly managing a timeline, a task list, a project plan for my humiliation. I wished I could zoom in on her screen. Was it a spreadsheet titled Rachel's Last Day Countdown? Probably. The most unnerving element, though, was Liam. He hadn't moved from his desk. He was hunched over, typing intensely. But I noticed his shoulder was twitching. Liam only twitches his shoulder when he is either trying not to laugh or trying not to cry. Given the context, I was going with the former. He was resisting the urge to break character and alert me. The depth of the betrayal stung. My bestie, the guy who once drove 20 miles on his lunch break to get me a specific brand of sparkling water, was in on the plot to potentially end my career. As I was pretending to aggressively scrape non-existent toner from the printer drum, I overheard a key exchange. A relatively innocent new hire, Jess, walked up to H's partially open door and politely knocked. "Mr. Harrison, I just wanted to ask about the supply order. Did we get the extra-large box I requested?" H's voice, instantly shifting from cheerful conspirator to stern boss, snapped back. "Yes, Jess, we got the box. It's in storage. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm on a very important confidential call." Jess, looking thoroughly chastised, scurried away. An extra-large box. My mind immediately connected this to the earlier phrase. A total surprise. They weren't using a simple filing box for my things. They needed an extra-large box. This meant one of two things. Either they were really going all out, and had bought me a ridiculously massive ornate farewell gift to mock me before my termination, or more likely, I owned a frankly embarrassing amount of unnecessary junk that they were meticulously packing up. I recalled the dozen silly coffee mugs I had accumulated, the 3 tubs of emergency snacks, the small, highly detailed ceramic owl I kept for good luck. The large box confirmed their intention to clear out my space. The office cleanup Liam had mentioned. Not a general policy, but a specific instruction for the day of my removal. I decided I had enough data from the immediate vicinity. My presence at the printer was becoming a little too performative. I gave the machine one last loud, despairing slap, declared loudly, "It's beyond saving," and retreated back to my desk, my heart heavy with the weight of my impending doom. I sat down, feeling defeated but focused. The clock was ticking towards 4 o'clock. I had the what, a surprise, a note, a massive box, and the when, 4 p.m. But I still lacked the crucial why and how. I leaned over to Liam, forcing myself to maintain eye contact, trying to pierce his shield of false concentration. "I need to print something really confidential. I don't trust that printer across the hall," I murmured, my voice low and serious. "Could you maybe use the one on the 5th floor for me? It's just a few pages." It was a test. If he was truly my friend, he'd help. If he was a loyal co-conspirator, he'd find an excuse not to leave his post. He slowly looked up, his expression unreadable. "Confidential, huh?" he said, his voice completely flat. "Yeah, sure, Rachel. Let me just wrap up this sentence." He didn't offer a joking remark. He didn't give me the usual sarcastic complaint. He simply agreed, but with a delay, a hesitation that spoke volumes. He was stalling, waiting for some signal, or perhaps waiting for me to be completely preoccupied before he made his move. The depth of the layered conflict was growing. I was surrounded by friends who were actively working against me, for what I now firmly believed was a cruel, elaborate, public firing or humiliation. My anxiety, already humming like a forgotten microwave, found a new frequency just minutes after my tense non-exchange with Liam. I was pretending to review a massive, pointless spreadsheet, the kind of work you do when you need to look busy but your brain is actually running a full-scale surveillance operation, when the chilling digital signature of impending doom flashed across my monitor. It wasn't an email to me, but an email on H's screen, which I could faintly see through the glass partition if I craned my neck just so. The email popped up briefly, a new notification box appearing in the corner of H's desktop. The sender was listed as HR, confidential, and the subject line was short, sharp, and instantly terrifying. "Finalizing termination paperwork, REF, Rachel B." I nearly inhaled my entire cheek. Finalizing termination paperwork. It wasn't a prank. It wasn't a joke about a banana peel or a shrink-wrapped chair. This was real. This was a corporate severance package with my name on it. The initial laughter and the word surprise now took on a deeply sinister meaning. They weren't laughing with me. They were laughing at the elaborate, secret performance they had designed for my professional execution. H's love of theatrical drama was being applied not to a silly office prank, but to a deeply uncomfortable, possibly public, firing. The note was probably the formal termination letter, signed with a flourish. The surprise was the moment I walked in and found the evidence of their betrayal. I felt a dizzying mix of panic, betrayal, and a very specific, icy rage. I looked at Liam, who was still quietly typing, his shoulder giving the occasional traitorous twitch. He knew. They all knew. They had spent the afternoon planning my exit while I was sitting 2 feet away, debating if I should risk using the last of the office creamer. The betrayal from Liam, my work confidant, was the sharpest stab of all. But the biggest red flag, the detail that truly crystallized my fear, was the nature of the email itself. It wasn't a standard internal HR email. The subject line, while visible, had a strange, almost encrypted look to it, a string of unusual characters surrounding the text. And when H opened it, briefly, carelessly, I caught a flash of the content. It wasn't the usual wall of corporate jargon. It contained almost no text, just a single large attachment icon labeled, Secure File, Project Phoenix. Project Phoenix. That sounded less like my termination and more like a massive, top-secret company restructuring where they eliminate entire departments. My mind raced, connecting the dots. H mentioned wanting to make it look like a slip-up. What if he intentionally left that email visible, knowing I was a nervous wreck and a natural eavesdropper? It wasn't a genuine mistake. It was the final flourish of psychological warfare. It was designed to send me spiraling, to get me to panic and possibly quit, saving them the mess of a formal firing. If I resigned, I couldn't claim unemployment or fight them. They were trying to manufacture a self-termination. The pressure mounted. I checked the clock. It was 3:15 p.m. 45 minutes until the 4 p.m. drop-off, and the arrival of the extra-large box. I had to act. The first step was to confirm Liam's status. I needed to know if he was complicit or if he was simply a frightened victim trying to stay out of the blast radius. I leaned over and quietly whispered, "Liam, I just saw something on H's screen. HR. Termination paperwork. Is this actually happening?" He didn't look up. His fingers stuttered slightly on the keys, a tiny, almost imperceptible hesitation. "Ratch, you know H has a lot of projects going. Probably just a standard personnel issue. Don't worry about things you can't control." His tone was too steady, too rational. The casual deflection felt practiced. "But the subject line was my name," I pushed, keeping my voice low but desperate. "And there was a file called Project Phoenix. It sounds like a reorganization." This time he did look up, and his expression was painfully ambiguous, a strange mix of pity and warning. "Look, Rachel," he murmured, glancing quickly around the deserted bullpen. "I really can't talk about projects right now. I'm swamped. Maybe we can grab a quick drink later. Let's just finish the day first." Finish the day. That phrase felt like an epitaph. He wasn't denying it. He wasn't offering comfort. He was offering a pity drink for a post-employment debriefing. The realization slammed into me. He was protecting the secret, not me. Whether he was forced into it or not didn't matter right now. He was on the other side. I felt a sudden, fierce rush of adrenaline. If they were trying to scare me into quitting, I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of a panicked meltdown. I wouldn't resign in tears. I would meet their theatrical drama with my own brand of quiet, contained fury. I had to salvage some dignity, and that meant preparing my own exit strategy. I quickly opened a blank document, saving it as Q4 Projections Update, and began to type not a resignation, but a list of my accomplishments and a strategy for how I would handle the termination. I was preparing for war. My emotional connection to the office crew, that dysfunctional family, had been severed by a single, encrypted email notification. The pity drink Liam was offering could wait. I was going to beat them to the punch. The clock had crawled past 3:45 p.m. I was sitting at my desk, feeling like a high-tension wire, vibrating with suppressed panic and adrenaline. My Q4 Projections Update was actually a detailed, bulleted list of my most impressive career wins at Stellar Innovations. Basically, a professional shield I planned to deploy during my inevitable final meeting with H. I was in the middle of writing a particularly sharp line about my successful negotiation of the Miller account when Liam unexpectedly stood up. "Lunch break," he announced a little too brightly, avoiding my eyes. "I'm starving. You want to join? Just a quick run to that sandwich place on the corner." Lunch break. It was 3:45 p.m. The office was quiet. No one takes a lunch break at 3:45 p.m. They usually take a coffee break, a stress snack break, or a frantic I haven't eaten all day I'm going to pass out break, but never a full, composed lunch break. And the timing was critical. 15 minutes before the 4 p.m. drop-off. They needed me to be completely preoccupied, as H had said earlier. They needed me out of the office so they could execute the final steps of Project Phoenix, probably bringing in the extra-large box and arranging the surprise evidence on my desk. This wasn't a lunch invitation. It was a sympathy lunch, a calculated maneuver to get me out of the building. And Liam, my supposed best friend, was the one executing the extraction. He was playing the part of the guilt-ridden friend, giving me a final private moment before the professional guillotine dropped. I felt a genuine pang of hurt, mixed with an intense, burning skepticism. This wasn't just a simple betrayal. This was an elaborate, emotional play. I couldn't refuse, though. Refusing would immediately alert them that I was onto their scheme, and I needed to maintain the illusion of being completely preoccupied if I was going to find out the truth. I forced a casual, tired smile. You know what, Liam? I could actually use some air. Let's go. My brain feels like scrambled eggs. As we walked toward the elevator, I noticed subtle shifts in the office environment. Sarah gave us a tight, high-anxiety wave. H's door clicked shut, the sound oddly final. Several other colleagues were suddenly engrossed in their computers, their backs facing us, their concentration almost aggressively deliberate. They were clearing the stage for the 4 p.m. drop-off. In the elevator, Liam was silent. Usually, he'd be filling the space with complaints about traffic or a ridiculous anecdote from his weekend. Today, the silence was heavy, punctuated only by the whoosh of the descending elevator. Once we were outside, walking briskly toward the sandwich shop, I decided to play my hand with calculated ambiguity, testing the depth of his complicity. It's weirdly calm in the office today, isn't it? Commented, keeping my tone light. Liam took a deep breath of the surprisingly smoggy city air. Yeah, well, you know how it is, Ratch. The calm before the storm. End of the quarter is always rough. A rough end to the quarter or a rough ending. I pressed, looking him straight in the eyes. I gave him a chance, an easy out to confess, to give me a subtle warning. He stopped walking. We were right outside the sandwich shop, surrounded by the normal hustle of the city, but the moment felt isolated and intense. He turned to me, his hands shoved deep into his hoodie pockets. His expression was genuinely troubled, the pity in his eyes unmistakable. Rachel, look. Whatever happens, you're the best person I've worked with. Seriously. And whatever you decide to do next, I'm in your corner. Okay. Whatever happens. Whatever you decide to do next. It was the language of an official, guilt-ridden goodbye. He wasn't denying the termination. He was giving me a gentle, preemptive eulogy for my job. The implication was clear. I was being fired, and he, while sad, couldn't openly talk about the Project Phoenix confidentiality. He was offering loyalty, but only after the fact. My suspicion hardened into certainty. They had succeeded in making me believe in the termination. I was angry, yes, but also deeply hurt by Liam's participation in the ruse. I didn't want his pity. I wanted the truth, and I wanted to hit back with the dignity of a prepared exit. That's really sweet, Liam, I said, forcing my voice to remain steady, masking the seismic shift of emotion happening inside me. But I already know what I'm deciding to do next. He looked genuinely surprised, perhaps expecting tears or a frantic plea for information. You do? Yeah, I said, starting to walk again, pulling open the door to the sandwich shop. I'm deciding to order the Turkey Club today. I never get the Turkey Club. It's time for a change. The forced lightness of my response threw him off. He stammered, "Oh, but good choice. Maybe you need a change." His ambiguous comment, which could be about a sandwich or a career change, was exactly the kind of passive-aggressive, coded message they had been exchanging all day. We ordered, and the next 10 minutes were excruciating. He tried to fill the silence with banal small talk, but I was plotting. I had confirmed the betrayal. I had confirmed the timing. The last thing I needed was the full details, the confirmation of the content of the note and the surprise, and I knew exactly who to go for next. The weakest link, the person most likely to crack under direct pressure, Sarah. I ate half my sandwich, took a long drink of water and announced, "Shoot, Liam. I forgot I left my phone on silent, and I'm expecting an important text from a client. Gotta run back quickly. I'll meet you back at the office, okay? Don't worry about me." Before he could argue, before he could deploy another one of H's delaying tactics, I was out the door. My mission was now urgent and singular. Confront a co-conspirator and get the confession I needed before 4 p.m. hit, and the curtain fell on Project Phoenix. I practically sprinted back to the office, my half-eaten Turkey Club abandoned on the table, leaving a thoroughly confused Liam standing in the sandwich line. The clock on my phone read 3:55 p.m. I had 5 minutes until the drop-off. I couldn't risk going back to my desk. I needed to intercept one of the conspirators, the one least capable of resisting interrogation. That person was undoubtedly Sarah. I found her exactly where I expected her to be. At her desk, meticulously organizing a stack of colorful printouts that looked suspiciously like party banners or decorations. Her brow was furrowed with concentration, and she was biting her lip, a telltale sign of high-level anxiety. She was alone. The bullpen was still deserted save for a few random colleagues who seemed completely oblivious to the corporate drama unfolding. I didn't try to be subtle. I walked up to her desk, placed my hands firmly on the edge of her monitor, and leaned in, my voice low and radiating an intensity one didn't know I possessed. "Sarah, stop what you are doing. Look at me," I commanded. Sarah practically yelped, jolting upright in her chair. The stack of brightly colored paper slipped from her hand and scattered across her desk. Her face went that familiar shade of alarming scarlet. She looked like a deer caught in the headlights of a very angry semi-truck. "Ah, Rachel, you're back. I thought you were with Liam. Having your sandwich," she stammered, frantically trying to scoop up the scattered papers while avoiding my gaze. "I know what you guys are doing," I stated flatly, cutting through her panic. I didn't have time for her evasions. "I heard H. I saw the email. Finalizing termination paperwork. I know about the note, the surprise, and the extra-large box. I know Liam was running interference to keep me occupied until the drop-off." I paused, letting the silence hang heavy between us. This was the moment of truth. "I just want to know why. Why the massive theatrical drama, Sarah? Why the humiliation? Why pretend this is a surprise party when you're planning on firing me?" Tears immediately welled up in Sarah's eyes. She put her hands over her mouth, her panic hitting full throttle. She was utterly incapable of maintaining the secrecy of Project Phoenix. She looked utterly miserable, truly guilt-ridden, and absolutely terrified of H's wrath for cracking. "Oh, Rachel, I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible, shaking her head wildly. "I didn't want to be involved, but H said it had to be a full team effort. He said it wouldn't be dramatic enough without the whole crew." The confession confirmed everything. She was sorry, which meant the thing they were doing was truly awful. H forced them into it, which explained the team's discomfort. It was a full team effort, which meant everyone, even Liam, was just an unwilling participant in H's drama. "So, it is a firing?" I asked, my voice tight. "And the note is the termination letter?" Sarah suddenly burst into full-blown tears, reaching across the desk and grabbing my arm. "No, it's not a firing. Oh my God, Rachel, no. It's the opposite of a firing. It's a huge. I can't tell you. H made us all sign a ridiculous non-disclosure agreement. But when I heard him laughing after he told us about this surprise, I thought it was so cruel. I told him the note was too much, that you would panic. But he said it had to be a complete misdirect. The opposite of a firing. This revelation stopped my angry train of thought cold. If it wasn't a firing, what was it? A massive demotion. A promotion so complicated it required an extra-large box. What's the opposite of a firing, Sarah? A promotion. What is in the box? I pressed, leaning closer, my anger slowly giving way to confusion. She sniffled, pulling a tissue from her dispenser. "I can only tell you one thing, Rachel, because you look like you're about to have a heart attack, and I can't handle that guilt." She leaned in, her eyes wide and wet. The note isn't the termination. It's supposed to be an apology for failing to keep the surprise a secret. That's what H meant by the slip-up. He meant us slipping up and letting you find out about it. The note says, "Sorry you had to find out this way. Sorry you had to find out this way." The words I had overheard, which I had interpreted as a smug apology for my professional death, were actually a scripted piece of H's theatrical mea culpa for a botched surprise. The entire structure of the conspiracy suddenly flipped. The fear, the laughter, the covert meetings. It wasn't about planning my ruin, but about planning a spectacular secret good thing. H's theatrical drama wasn't malicious. It was simply H being H. The encrypted email was likely a fake or a setup. Liam's pity was not for my career, but for my anxiety, knowing how badly the surprise was being handled. And the extra-large box. It contained the huge thing, the opposite of a firing. My mind raced. 3:58 p.m. 2 minutes until the drop-off. The guilt in Sarah's face was genuine. She had had my answer. I had completely misread the room, turning a good thing into a disaster simply by eavesdropping. I needed to leave Sarah before H found out she had confessed. Okay, Sarah. Thank you. I appreciate you telling me, I said, straightening up. You haven't told me what the surprise is, and you need to pretend you didn't just say anything to me, okay? Go back to arranging your paperwork. I grabbed my water bottle, my heart now thumping with a mix of relief and intense embarrassment. I had completely jumped the shark. My next meeting with H was in 2 minutes, and I had a pre-written resignation letter on my desktop. I needed to delete that immediately and walk in there acting like a normal, unsuspecting employee. The confrontation was over, but the fallout was just beginning. The rush of adrenaline, which had been powering my furious pursuit of the truth over the last 2 hours, suddenly drained out of me, leaving me feeling hollowed out and overwhelmingly embarrassed. Sarah's tearful confession that this surprise was the opposite of a firing, and that the chilling note was just H's way of apologizing for the botched secrecy, completely changed the dynamic. I hadn't been an unfortunate victim of corporate treachery. I had been an overly dramatic, paranoid eavesdropper who had misinterpreted a good thing as a bad thing. Now, with the clock ticking toward the 4 p.m. drop-off and my scheduled meeting with H, I was faced with a critical problem. I still had a draft of a furiously worded preemptive resignation letter open on my computer. I needed to deal with this before H or Liam came back and saw it. The document, titled Q4 Projections Update, the brilliant decoy I'd used to shield my true intentions, was currently residing on my desktop. I opened it and stared at the lines of my own making. To Mr. Harrison, please accept this letter as formal notice of my immediate resignation. I refuse to participate in the kind of toxic, manipulative corporate culture that requires this level of sustained psychological warfare against its dedicated employees. While I appreciate the theatrical drama, I prefer to work in an environment where professional communication is prioritized over juvenile, humiliating pranks. I have attached a list of my accomplishments, which I trust you will find satisfactory justification for the 3 months of unemployment benefits I will be filing for. Reading it back, I cringed so hard I nearly pulled a muscle. It was overwrought, overly dramatic, and completely unnecessary. It was the emotional reaction of a paranoid employee who thought their friends were secretly plotting their downfall. And I was about to walk into a room where they were actually planning a huge, positive surprise for me. I quickly highlighted the entire text. Delete. No, wait. Just deleting it leaves a blank document. That's suspicious. I needed a distraction. I quickly typed a single random line. Q4 projections. Need to adjust figures based on Miller account performance. Better. But the file name was still Q4 projections update. I needed to make it look like I was diligently preparing for the meeting. I quickly saved it, minimized it, and then spent a frantic 30 seconds attempting to make my desk look normal and unsuspecting. I tossed my half-eaten sympathy sandwich wrapper in the trash and quickly hid the ceramic owl that I was now convinced was spying on me. My focus shifted to Liam. He would be walking back from the sandwich shop soon, totally unaware that his guilt-ridden friend had just confessed the entire structure of the surprise. I couldn't let him know that I knew, or H's final flourish would be ruined, and I would look like the world's most cynical employee. I had to maintain the mask of an employee who was resigned to her fate. I stood up and quickly walked over to the office water cooler, right near the elevator, as if waiting for Liam. It was 3:59 p.m. The elevator chimed, and out stepped Liam, looking slightly stressed, carrying his own sandwich and a drink. He saw me and gave a small, nervous smile. Hey Rach, you're fast. Everything okay with the client text? I gave a weak, resigned shrug, the picture of weary acceptance. Yeah, Everything's fine. Just getting ready for my 4 o'clock with H. You know. Clearing my schedule. The deliberate ambiguity of clearing my schedule was my little private joke. He looked pained. Right. Look, just keep your head up. Whatever he says, remember what I told you. He walked back to his desk, clearly relieved that I was taking my impending doom with quiet dignity, which only deepened his guilt. The second he was at his desk, the office energy shifted. I saw Sarah give Liam a quick, relieved nod as if to say, "She's still clueless, crisis averted." The clock on the wall hit 4 p.m. The moment of the drop-off had arrived. I noticed a slight shuffling sound from down the hall, near the unused secondary entrance, the one right next to H's door. I heard the muffled squeak of a moving cart. 2 figures, not H, but 2 guys from the mailroom who clearly looked like they were in on the secret, quickly and quietly wheeled something massive into H's office. It was a box, yes, but not just a box. It was a huge, professionally wrapped object, concealed under a thick, dark cloth. The extra-large box had arrived. My heart was racing again, but this time with a mixture of nervous excitement and the absolute dread of having to pretend I was clueless. The theatrical drama was playing out exactly as planned, and now I was the unwitting yet fully informed star of the show. I just had to walk in there, act surprised, and then find out what the opposite of a firing actually was. The clock on the wall now read 4:02 p.m. The massive, shrouded object had been successfully delivered to H's office, and the 2 mailroom guys, who looked far too excited for their mundane jobs, had scurried away. It was showtime. The dramatic tension H loved was at its absolute peak, and I, the supposedly unsuspecting victim, had to play my part perfectly to avoid blowing the entire expensive-looking operation. I walked the 10 steps from the water cooler to H's door, trying to compose a face that showed appropriate levels of professional calm mixed with a subtle, underlying career-ending anxiety. I raised my hand to knock, but before my knuckles could make contact, the door was pulled open from the inside. Standing there was H, looking extremely pleased with himself. His booming laugh now replaced with a low, controlled, deeply self-satisfied grin. Sarah was standing just behind him, looking terrified, and Liam was a nervous mess in the background. My whole team was there, clustered awkwardly in H's small office, all trying to look casual but failing miserably. "Rachel." "Right on time," H announced. His voice just a little too loud, projecting theatrical cheerfulness. Come in. Have a seat. I think we need to have a little chat about your future here at Stellar Innovations." The word future, delivered with that heavy, stagey emphasis, was the final piece of the dramatic puzzle. He was playing the role of the stern boss about to deliver bad news, which was all part of the misdirect Sarah had warned me about. I walked in, my eyes immediately darting to the center of the room. There against the back wall was the massive extra-large box. It was draped in a dark velvet cloth, and it was huge, easily the size of a small refrigerator. Its sheer, ridiculous size made the entire situation instantly absurd, further confirming that this was a prank or a massive, grand gesture, not a termination. No one needed a box that big to pack up my cat photos and old coffee mugs. I made sure my gaze lingered on the box, allowing my expression to show a controlled, nervous curiosity. I needed to let them think I was focusing on the result of the mystery, not the source of the plotting. "I see," I said, my voice deliberately quiet and measured. "Well, I'm ready for the chat, H. I think I know what this is about." My comment was meant to be ambiguous. Was I referring to the real surprise or the fake termination? H, naturally, interpreted it as confirmation that his misdirect was working perfectly. He folded his hands on his desk, adopting a serious, almost mournful expression. "Rachel, you've been an incredible asset to this team. One of our very best. Which makes this all the more difficult." He glanced at Liam, who looked like he wanted the floor to open up and swallow him whole. "I understand," I replied, managing to keep my voice flat. I sat down in the chair he offered, right in front of his desk. I resisted the urge to look back at the team, who were practically vibrating with anticipation behind me. H cleared his throat dramatically. We had hoped to keep this a complete secret. A total surprise, as I told Sarah. He threw a pointed look at Sarah, who visibly flinched. But certain logistical slip-ups, and I'm sure you've heard a few things, have made that impossible. So, I'm afraid we have to cut to the chase. He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a single, plain white envelope. My heart did a quick skip. A note. This was the centerpiece of the drama, the final flourish that would either be a terrifying termination or a ridiculously over-the-top apology. He slowly slid the envelope across the desk toward me. Rachel, this letter explains everything. It explains the discussions, the whispers, the drama, and why we had to be so highly secretive. And I want you to know, as you read it, that the entire team here is on board. We've all been involved in making this happen. He paused for maximum dramatic effect, his face radiating an almost unbearable amount of self-importance. He was soaking up the tension, fully enjoying his moment as the mastermind of the surprise. I picked up the envelope, my fingers deliberately trembling slightly. I ripped it open and pulled out the single sheet of paper inside. It wasn't a formal multi-page HR document. It was a single type sheet. My eyes went straight to the bottom, the lines I knew were coming. P.S. Sorry you had to find out this way. The note, the famous note, was exactly what Sarah had said it would be. H's absurdly dramatic apology for the failure of his own secrecy. The sudden, immense relief was almost enough to make me laugh, but I held it in. I started reading the actual contents of the letter, my eyes scanning for the opposite of a firing. And that's when I noticed something that made me freeze. I looked around the room, at H, at Sarah, at Liam, at the enormous velvet-draped object behind me, and then back down at the piece of paper in my hand. The note was not what I expected. The surprise was clearly here, but my desk was empty. I hadn't realized it when I walked in, focused as I was on the colossal object and H's face. My desk, visible through the glass partition, was completely bare. Everything was gone. No laptop, no files, no photos of Mittens, no ceramic owl. They had cleared it out. The extra-large box wasn't for my belongings. The box was the surprise. But why was my desk empty? The sinking feeling returned, a mix of panic and confusion, as I finally read the first line of the actual letter. I sat in H's office, the white envelope clutched in my hand, my carefully constructed facade of dignity and control rapidly dissolving. The empty desk. I had been so focused on the massive shrouded box and the scripted drama with H that I hadn't noticed the terrifying truth happening just a few feet away, outside the glass. My workspace was utterly, completely bare. The extra-large box had arrived, but my desk had been preemptively packed up. I knew Sarah had told me it was the opposite of a firing, but seeing my desk completely cleared, the physical evidence of my removal, overrode her tearful confession. The knot of fear that had momentarily loosened in my chest tightened again, bigger and more suffocating than before. They had successfully misdirected me with a note and the surprise box, while quietly executing the final, devastating logistics. Operation, clear Rachel's stuff. I looked at the note again, the first line of which had made my stomach drop. Dear Rachel, after much deliberation and an unfortunately public discussion, we have determined that you are no longer able to effectively perform your duties from this location. No longer able to perform my duties from this location. My mind went straight back to Project Phoenix. The reorganization. The opposite of a firing wasn't a promotion. It was a clever way to say transfer or relocation. And the empty desk meant the transfer was effective immediately. They hadn't fired me, but they were forcing me out of the office, likely to a horrible windowless storage room in the basement to do tedious data entry until I quit. My fear returned with a cynical, self-loathing vengeance. Of course, H's theatrical drama was layered. The note and the box were the bait, and the empty desk was the real punchline. I looked up at H, my composure finally breaking, and a genuine hurt anger flashed in my eyes. The empty desk, I stated, my voice low and trembling. You cleared my desk. You're moving me, aren't you? You saw the encrypted email, Project Phoenix is a relocation. You weren't firing me, but you were forcing me out of the team, and you used this ridiculous surprise to make me think it was something good. H's composure wavered for the first time. His face, which had been beaming with the excitement of his own cleverness, now looked genuinely confused and slightly worried. He glanced back at the team, then at the empty desk. Liam, who had remained silent, took a small, nervous step forward. Rachel, what are you— No, wait. That's not what happened. The desk. H quickly cut him off, a hint of steel entering his voice as he tried to regain control of his dramatic presentation. Rachel, please. Read the whole letter. It's an explanation. The desk is empty for a reason, but it's not the reason you think. Now, this is supposed to be a surprise, and you're ruining the dramatic tension I worked so hard for. He pointed a finger at the gigantic, shrouded object. The surprise is right there. I ignored him. I looked directly at Liam, my voice cracking slightly. You knew, Liam. You all knew they were clearing out my desk. You offered me a pity lunch so they could do it. You watched me panic for 2 hours and you let me. Why? Why the cruelty, Liam? I thought you were my friend. Liam's eyes were wide with distress. No, Ratch, I swear. I didn't know. I only knew it was a huge, good surprise. The empty desk is my fault. H sighed, burying his face in his hands. Oh, for the love of corporate theatrics. Fine. The surprise is ruined anyway. Liam, what did you do? Liam looked like he was about to vomit. He nervously pointed a finger across the hall, not at my desk, but at his own, which was now stacked precariously high with all my junk. The ceramic owl perched precariously on a tower of old files, the mugs jammed between his monitor and his keyboard, and a massive bulging box of my personal effects sitting squarely in his chair. The box wasn't big enough, Liam stammered. And you said the team had to be in on it, and I felt so bad about the fake termination stuff, so I offered to help Sarah clear your desk. But you told her to order the extra-large box for the surprise, not for her things. I thought you meant for my things, so I went and borrowed the biggest shipping box in the storage room and just put all your stuff on my desk and inside the big empty box so it would look like my stuff was cleared out instead. I thought it would be funny when you walked in and thought I was the one being fired, and then you'd get the surprise. It was a preemptive reverse psychology prank to distract you from the real surprise. The realization hit me with the force of a cartoon anvil. Liam, in a misguided attempt to be funny, and likely to alleviate his guilt over the fake termination, had cleared my desk but moved my belongings to his desk, using a random storage box as the decoy for his own supposed termination. He had accidentally created the exact visual evidence of my firing, totally independent of H's actual plan. My own best friend, trying to save me from a cruel fate, had instead provided the perfect, agonizing final piece of evidence for my own misinterpretation. My professional paranoia had just been compounded by my best friend's dramatic, self-sabotaging loyalty. I looked from Liam, whose face was a portrait of regret, to H, who was massaging his temples, and then back to the letter in my hand. I had to finish reading the opposite of a firing before any more disastrous misunderstandings could occur. I took a deep, shaky breath, silencing the room. The dramatic confession of Liam's well-intentioned, but ultimately catastrophic reverse prank attempt had finally brought the layered conflict to a hilarious, mortifying head. The empty desk wasn't an HR maneuver. It was the collateral damage of a friend's guilt. The terror was replaced by a wave of intense, burning shame. I had been planning a glorious resignation, and they had been planning a massive, good surprise, and the only thing that had been manipulative was my own paranoia. I forced myself to look back down at the letter, ignoring the ridiculous scene unfolding around me. Liam slumped in shame, Sarah openly weeping, and H staring into the middle distance, clearly contemplating a career change. I needed to know the opposite of a firing. I continued reading the letter from where I had left off. We have determined that you are no longer able to effectively perform your duties from this location. You are, in fact, required to be out of the country for the next 3 weeks in order to launch our massive new international account, Project Phoenix. Which, yes, we named after the mythical bird that rises from the ashes. Very dramatic, we know. You have been selected as the lead strategist to go on site and manage the kickoff of this campaign in Southeast Asia. My eyes widened. The lead strategist. A massive new international account. This wasn't a firing. It wasn't a demotion or a transfer to a basement. It was the biggest promotion and professional opportunity of my career. And the finalizing termination paperwork email I saw on H's screen was either a fake H had engineered to further the slip-up narrative, or more likely, a code name for the incredibly complex legal contracts required to secure an employee to travel abroad for that long. I skimmed the rest of the letter, which detailed the logistics. Flights, lodging, per diem, all covered. I was being sent to a major global launch. The anxiety was instantly replaced by dizzying elation. I looked up, a genuine smile finally replacing the terror on my face. Project Phoenix is the launch in Southeast Asia, I stated, a sense of awe in my voice. I'm going to be the lead. H straightened up, a proud, if somewhat deflated, smile returning. Yes, Rachel. Congratulations. We were going to make a massive announcement, with a banner and a champagne toast, but you know. The slip-ups. He glared at Liam. Liam, however, was already recovering. His loyalty to me clearly overriding his shame. It's huge, Rach. It's what we've all been rooting for. But wait, I said, looking back at the desk. The note and the surprise box. What is that? H gestured toward the enormous, draped object against the wall. That, my dear Rachel, is the actual surprise. We couldn't just send you off to a foreign country with nothing but your laptop. You are traveling for 3 weeks. You need supplies. And a little luxury. He walked over, and with a flourish that was a little too slow for the moment, he whipped the velvet cloth off the box. It wasn't a box at all. It was an absolutely stunning, top-of-the-line massive piece of luggage. A whole matched set of 3 lightweight hard-shell suitcases, stacked inside one another. The kind of luggage that costs more than my monthly rent, complete with an attached leather tag that read, Rachel. And sitting on top of the luggage was a small, beautifully wrapped gift box, and a single, smaller, perfectly folded piece of paper. This was the real final flourish. I picked up the small note. It was a card signed by the entire team. It read, Dear Rachel, you earned this. Pack light, stress less, and take a lot of pictures. See you in 3 weeks. The Stellar Innovations team. And beneath the signature, in H's own unmistakable bold handwriting, was the line I had heard bouncing off his door hours ago, the line that had sent me on a 3-hour spiral of paranoia and self-doubt. P.S. Sorry you had to find out this way. The note wasn't an apology for failing to keep the secret. It was an apology for the mess they had made in the attempt. The laugh was joy, not cruelty. The termination paperwork was a set of travel documents. The sympathy lunch was an extraction to enable the luggage drop-off. The entire terrifying scenario was a comedy of errors, born from a boss's love of spectacle and a friend's misguided attempt at a reverse psychology prank. I looked at the luggage, then at the beaming faces of my colleagues. The humiliation of my paranoia was intense, but the sheer relief and gratitude for their genuine kindness was overwhelming. I laughed, a real, genuine, joyful laugh, the first one that day. The entire drama had been a gift, wrapped in layers of professional anxiety and misunderstandings. The tension in H's office finally broke. My laugh was the cue for the rest of the team to erupt in relief, and a few apologetic groans aimed at Liam. H immediately launched into a rambling explanation of why he thought the fake termination was the most dramatic and therefore best way to deliver the news, and how he had personally orchestrated the slip-up email with the encrypted text just to pique my curiosity. The level of self-congratulation was astounding, but I didn't even care. I was too busy absorbing the fantastic news. So, where exactly am I going? I asked, looking up from the gorgeous new luggage. H pulled out a glossy travel brochure with a picture of a breathtaking turquoise ocean. You, Rachel, are going to be spearheading the launch in Bali, Indonesia. The client is a major luxury resort chain, and the initial work requires a full on-site immersion for 3 weeks. Bully. 3 weeks. I was speechless. This wasn't just a promotion, it was a dream assignment. And my entire agonizing, paranoia-fueled afternoon had been a giant, elaborate lead-up to this moment. I turned to Liam, who was still looking mortified by his disastrous reverse prank attempt. "Liam," I said, unable to hide my smile. "I owe you an apology. And I think I owe you a few $100s for all the emotional damage you inflicted." He grinned, his usual sarcasm returning. "Only a few $100. I think the anguish I felt watching you spiral is worth at least $1,000, Ratch. But in all seriousness, congratulations. We're all incredibly proud." He paused, then added, "Also, I'm so sorry you found your empty desk. It looked way funnier in my head." Sarah, wiping her eyes, chimed in. "I told him the note was too much. I really thought you were going to resign." "Actually," I confessed, leaning back in my chair, "I may have drafted a truly terrible, highly dramatic preemptive resignation letter." I laughed. "It was something." H's eyes lit up. "A dramatic resignation letter. This is why I love the theatrical element. That would have been the ultimate, final flourish. I wish I could read it." "Don't even think about it, H," I warned him, already mentally preparing to permanently delete the document once I was back at my desk. The team spent the next few minutes offering their congratulations and their own stories of how hard it was to keep the secret. They revealed that the laughter I heard at the beginning wasn't about me being the punchline, but about H demonstrating how I would react when I saw my empty desk, a demonstration which, ironically, had completely backfired thanks to Liam's meddling. I realized then how completely I had misunderstood the environment. I worked with people who weren't malicious. They were just genuinely terrible at keeping an exciting secret from their friend, especially when led by a boss who equated secrecy with high drama. My anxiety had turned a huge, wonderful surprise into a terrifying professional crisis. As the team started filing out to give me a few minutes with H, I picked up the travel brochure again, the turquoise water of Bali shimmering in the fluorescent office light. The crisis was over, the mystery solved, and the resolution was sweeter than I could have imagined. I had my dream assignment, a gorgeous new luggage set, and a fantastic story to tell, which gave me one last firm handshake. "Go home, Rachel. Start packing. Your flight is Saturday morning. And please try not to overhear any more of my confidential conversations." I looked at him, then at my beautiful new luggage. "No promises, H. You know I love a good mystery." I walked out of the office, the empty dread replaced by giddy anticipation. The massive piece of luggage now sat proudly beside my desk. Liam was already busy trying to cram my belongings from his desk back into the borrowed storage box. I knew I'd never look at a closed-door meeting, a whispered name, or a cryptic email the same way again. The moral of the story: sometimes the whispers and the laughter aren't about your impending doom, they're about your impending adventure. And sometimes your paranoia is just your boss being incredibly, unnecessarily dramatic. If you enjoyed this story about over-the-top office drama, misread signals, and a huge, unexpected twist, please drop a comment below to tell me what you would have done if you saw that termination paperwork email. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more viral stories.